Welcome to the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund Phase 2 briefing event. My name is Jenny McDonald from KTN, and I'm hosting today's event on behalf of the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, supported by my colleagues Olivia Brown and Louise Jones. So before we get started with today's event, I just want to run through a few items of housekeeping so that you get the most value from today. So as you're on YouTube, you can't put your video on or speak on the webinar because we're in Zoom, but we do want you to ask as many questions as you want to. So please use the chat box on YouTube to ask any questions as you go through the presentations this morning. And please don't wait until the Q&A session before you start typing your questions in. My colleague Louise Jones is on YouTube with you, and she'll copy your questions across to us. So that will help us to prepare our answers ready for the Q&A. So as you're watching, if something occurs to you, just type it into the chat box on YouTube and we'll answer that at the Q&A. And now we're all, after 18 months, very used to doing online events. So please take this opportunity to network and introduce yourself on YouTube. We have over 600 people registered for today's event. So hopefully there's plenty of people on there for you to talk to. So pop your name in, a bit about your organisation, and maybe a couple of sentences on why you're interested in the IETF. Today's event is also being recorded, and you'll get a link to the recording after the event so that you can watch it again or share with colleagues who maybe weren't able to attend today. You'll also receive a link to the presentations if you'd rather just through the presentations. And finally, we're offering our usual one-to-one confidential chats after today's event. So at 1:30, you will be able to book meetings from 1:30 onwards with either BEIS or myself if you want to talk about your project ideas for the IETF in confidence. Please go to the dedicated IETF networking platform, with the link is on there now, and register, and then you'll be able to book a meeting with us for this afternoon. So next slide, let's have a look at the agenda. So this is the welcome. I will then be handing over to BEIS to do an introduction to sort of set the scene around the policy that is driving the IETF funding. We will then hear more detail about the competitions that are open in phase 2, talk through the scope, the eligibility and how to apply. And then you'll get your chance to have your questions answered. So we will try and get through as many questions as we can at the Q&A session. If there's any that we don't cover, then we will come do a frequently asked questions list, which we will put onto the website. So your questions will still be answered, even if they're not answered today. We would then like you to all take part in a very brief Menti-Meter Survey. There's only 5 questions, but that will really help us to tailor the phase 2 competitions for next year, make sure that it is helping you to decarbonise your sites, and then we'll have a break. After the break, we have 2 case study speakers, 2 projects that were funded in phase 1 last year, just to give you some ideas of the types of things that could be done with the IETF funding. And then it's time for a little bit of audience participation, and we have 12 companies that are going to do a 2-minute pitch about either the technology that they have to offer to potential industrial sites, and also we have one of the industrial sites who's looking for technology to do a pitch as well, so that's great. And then finally, I'll wrap up with an overview of the support that's available to potential applicants to help you to actually submit your applications. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, who is Barber, the Deputy Director for the IETF Fund from BEIS. And Catherine's going to set the scene for us with a little bit about the net zero policy. So over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Jenny, and good morning, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here with my team from the Department for Business to present to you this phase 2 of the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund. We've been working on this fund for over 2 years now, and we really wouldn't be where we are today without a lot of advice and engagement and feedback from businesses, both individual companies and business associations. So if you've taken the time over those 2 years to respond to our consultations, to tell us about your potential projects, or indeed to apply in phase 1. Thank you so much. It has really helped us shape this fund. And if you're encountering us for the first time and you've not come across the Ietf before, and this is your first experience of us, you're very warmly welcome. We're delighted to have you here. So let me explain why we have this fund. We as a country have taken a big collective commitment to get to net zero or carbon neutrality in our economy by 2050. I'm sure you'll have heard the government talk about that, and you'll be thinking about what it means for your business. Industry is a big part of the UK economy, and therefore a significant part of UK emissions as well, about 1/6 of all emissions at the moment. And to reach the 2050 target, we therefore understand that industrial emissions will need to fall by about 90% from today's levels. That's a huge change. It's a vital one. But we know that for you, where that may just be 1 or 2 investment cycles away, that means some big choices now. The industrial decarbonisation strategy that the government published earlier this year sets out how we think that pathway to net zero can be achieved for industry. And perhaps my favourite graph from it is this one shown here, which shows decade by decade what that transformation might look like. So in the 2020s, a lot of the work will be done by energy efficiency and resource efficiency, but we also need to start on technologies like switching fuels to hydrogen, electricity, and capturing carbon for use and storage. And that's what the Ietf is here to help with, to accelerate that transformation in the 2020s. So what is the government doing? Well as the Ietf, we're doing 4 things I'd like to tell you about. The first is setting out a clear strategy. We published the industrial decarbonisation strategy, and quite recently also a hydrogen strategy that you may have seen, and that's setting the long-term trajectory. We're investing a lot, so the Ietf is at the deployment end when technology has already been proven, but there's also BEIS funding for research and innovation at the earlier stages of the journey as well. We're building markets. We've launched the UK ETS. We have a carbon price in the UK now, and we're strengthening that as well. And we have a particular focus on industrial clusters. As you can see here, there are 6 big industrial clusters in the UK, which contribute more than half of all of our industrial emissions. So we have a goal to support the delivery of 4 low carbon clusters by 2030, and at least 1 net zero cluster by 2040. So the Ietf has, I'm skipping there. The Ietf has 2 objectives. They are to help you to reduce your energy costs and your carbon emissions. And also we want to invest in bringing down the costs and risks of new technologies by demonstrating them at scale. We focus on industrial processes. We can offer capital investment for your industrial site. And we support companies that are in England, Wales, or Northern Ireland. And our colleagues in the Scottish Government run an equivalent fund called the Scottish Ietf, which is very similar. So who's who? Well, I'm from BEIS. My team that you'll meet shortly also involved in running the competition window. So anything that you need to find out about the application, assessment, or award process, you can find on our web pages at gov.uk. We're partnering with KTN, with Jenny and her colleagues, who will be disseminating information about the fund, including through today's event, and also running some matchmaking events so you can get to know potential project partners. If you have a site in Scotland, as I mentioned, do turn to the Scottish Government who have a Scottish Ietf equivalent. So let's talk about the money. We have a budget of £289 million to invest over 5 years, and we're allocating that in 2 phases. We've already held 2 competition windows under phase 1. They went very well, and we expect to spend up to £70 million of the fund through those 2 competitions. And that leaves about £220 million that is up for grabs now in phase 2. And we're intending to run 4 windows for you to apply in, as shown here. And there's £60 million available in this first window that is now open. And the key difference between phase 1 and phase 2 is that our ambition for deep decarbonisation projects is extended. We can now take applications for what we're calling deep decarbonisation. And I'll come on to explaining a bit more about what that means. So energy efficiency still really matters to us. As I said at the beginning, it's a big part of what industry needs to do in the 2020s. You can apply for a grant to install or retrofit process equipment on your site. And you can also get funding if you've got an idea for a technology option, but you need to do a study to be sure about it. The Ietf can support that. As I said, we've been talking a lot to businesses over the last 2 years about your potential projects, but we'd still like to hear from you about what the barriers are to your investment in energy efficiency. So we have a survey that is open, being run by IFF Research. And if you have time after this event, we'd love it if you could give us some feedback through that survey. So deep decarbonisation is what I mentioned earlier. We're interested in key technologies like electrifying industrial processes, fuel switching in a way that saves carbon, potentially to hydrogen or to other low carbon fuels. And we're also interested in capturing carbon for use and storage. You can fund your equipment on site and we can fund your studies. I should make it clear that the Ietf doesn't support operating costs. We don't support fuel production or transport and storage infrastructure. We're really focused on your on-site equipment. But there are other BEIS funds which complement us, and the Net Zero Hydrogen Fund and the Carbon Capture Storage Infrastructure Fund may also be relevant for you. If you're interested in those, do let us know. We can help to connect you with our colleagues. I talked about the cluster mission that we have going, and the first successful clusters will be announced for support this autumn. And if you're on one of those clusters and you're thinking about deploying CCUS, do take a look at that competition, which runs in parallel to the Ietf. Because if you're successful through that competition, you may be able to get both capital support, but also support with your operational expenses. So that's an important competition too. So let me tell you about our winners from last year. You will hear from a couple of them shortly. We ran the window last summer, closed in autumn, and we were delighted to approve over £30 million of government funding going towards 39 projects. It was really well spread over the country. We had applications from England, Wales and Northern Ireland. Many different sectors and different technologies were included. You can find out more information about those projects, both from listening to the next speakers and also from our website, gov.uk. but they include sectors like paper, food and drink, steel, other metals, glass, and more. So do draw inspiration from those. As you prepare your application, we have a lot of support for you. We have guidance online. Please, please, please do read that guidance before you start filling in a form. It's there to help you, and we don't want to waste your time if your technology isn't in scope or your company or site isn't eligible. The guidance would help you find that out first. So do take a look at that. Secondly, please do use the virtual technology marketplace that KTN are running for us to build partnerships so that you can put in an application potentially with a technology provider if there's somebody who can help you. And finally, do use our support services from BEIS. We have an eligibility checking service that you'll hear more about, and we'll also have stakeholder clinics that will run throughout the window. So it's not just today's event, there's another 2 months of help and support out there for you. And you can contact us on this email, ietf@beis.gov.uk. A final message from me, if you have an idea which isn't yet at the stage of being ready to deploy, if it's not yet proven in an industrial context, do take a look at the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio. Our colleagues in BEIS have £1 billion to invest. So if you've got an earlier stage idea, you may be able to get help from them before coming to the IETF to help with the deployment. So that's it from me. Thank you so much. And I will hand on to my colleagues now.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That was great. So if you do have any questions for Catherine around any of the policy and the slides that she's just presented, type those into the chat box on YouTube for us straight away, and we'll try and cover those at the Q&A. But next up, we have Lily Tozer, the IETF policy advisor, and Bess Hume, the senior policy advisor at BEIS. They're both going to now present to you the competition details, so scope, eligibility, and how to apply. So over to you, Lily.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm Lily Tozer. I'm joined here with my colleague Bess Hume, who I'll pass over to shortly. We both work in the Industrial Energy Transformation Fund team, and will be available throughout the window to help answer any questions, as Catherine mentioned. If you do have any questions following this presentation, really happy to help you. So the competition itself, as you'll be aware, is live and running. So we've opened up the portal so you can go to gov.uk after the webinar session today and start an application. You'll need to make sure that you've submitted the application by the 6th of December, which is when the competition window closes. And please do note that 3 PM deadline, so all applications must be submitted by then. After that, we'll take a review of the applications that we've received and assess those, giving each of the applications a score. And in the new year, you'll be informed as to whether you were successful in getting funding through our competition. If you're successful, we'll then go through a process of working with you to go through some due diligence stages, and then you'll be able to sign a grant funding agreement with us. Once you have that document, you'll be able to go ahead and start your project and start spending money. And we just require that you've done that, so you make sure that you've kick-started either your study or your deployment project no later than the 1st of May 2023. And then if you are undertaking a feasibility study, that we ask that you're able to complete that by May 2024. Or if it's a slightly bigger project, so an engineering study or a deployment project, that you're able to complete that by March 2025. So if you do have a proposal in mind that you think might fit quite well with these timings, then I'll talk you through some of the further eligibility rules that will apply. We will have later competitions, as Catherine outlined, so if perhaps some of the timings here don't work with maybe your internal investment cycles or decision-making processes, there will be other opportunities to apply to the fund as well. So we've mentioned the 3 different competition strands. So there's the energy efficiency deployment competition, which we ran in phase 1 as well. The new competition strand, which is for deep decarbonisation deployment technologies. And then the studies strand. Studies can be for both energy efficiency or decarbonisation technologies, and you can apply with either a feasibility or an engineering study. Some of the rules that I'll outline here apply across all of the strands, and some of them are strand specific. So as we go through, I'll note whether each applies. So in terms of whether or not you can apply yourself, as Catherine mentioned, the ITF is set up to support businesses within England, Wales and Northern Ireland to reduce their emissions and their energy consumption. So you must make sure that you're registered in England, Wales and Northern Ireland in order to be eligible for the scheme, and you must have a site or sites that are also within those regions, and they would be the focus of your study or your deployment project. And then as the lead applicant, we'd also expect you can verify that you're carrying out an industrial process. And for the purpose of this competition, we use standard industrial classification codes to outline what an eligible process would be. So this covers the mining and quarrying sector, manufacturing, recovery and recycling of materials, and there you must make sure obviously you're a private company carrying out those activities, and also data centres. So this covers a range of energy intensive industrial processes. You can find out whether your company has a SIC code that aligns to this by checking your company's house account. This would be a 5-digit number that you can find against all of the rest of your company details. In some cases, it might be that actually your company is registered with a SIC code that doesn't reflect the activity that you're carrying out at your site. So for example, you might be operating a data centre, but your company is registered as a telecoms company, for example. That's not an issue at all. What we'll ask you to do at the application stage is just to tell us what SIC code best aligns to the activity that you're carrying out, and give us enough details that we can verify whether that's the case. We'd also really encourage you to get in touch with us in BEIS just to double check that you're eligible if you've got any queries about what sort of classification you might be fitting under. And then having decided that you would be eligible as a lead applicant, you'd be very welcome to collaborate with other types of organisation on your project. So these could come from, might be another private sector company that you're working with, a research organisation, a charity, for example. And they might be willing to take on part of the costs or part of the work as part of the project with you. So truly collaborative type of project. If we're going to give funding to these types of projects, then the project partners must also follow some eligibility rules as well. So again, they'd have to be registered in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And we do ask, obviously, to make sure that any of the work that they're doing is in relation to your site. So again, our focus as an ITF fund is to make sure that we are decarbonising industrial sites. So we're not funding sort of general research and development and innovation. We're very much keen that all of our funding goes towards an end beneficiary site that's carrying out an industrial process. We'll also sort of only have a legal relationship with the direct lead applicant. So you as a manufacturer or a data centre or mining and quarrying operator must make sure that you're happy with that arrangement, that you're willing to be the lead applicant and to take forward the grant on that basis. There are a few more specific project partner rules that apply. Please take a look in our guidance for those. I've picked out one here that's relevant in that we do cap the amount of costs that research organisations can claim at 30% of the total cost. Again, that's just because the nature of the funding we're trying to provide is more towards the deployment or sort of the practical implications of carrying out some of these technologies at industrial sites rather than research activities. And I'll now jump into talking a bit more about some of the strand-specific rules. So firstly, for the study strand, we mentioned that you can apply for either a feasibility or an engineering study. Please take a look at whether the proposal that you have in mind would fit under the categorisations as I've described them here. So the outcome of a feasibility study should be a written report which sets out the conclusions of an investigation into whether a technology solution would be technically and commercially viable at your site within your industrial process. It should look at one single technology solution. So through the ITF, we can't support, for example, an audit of your whole site's energy consumption, or perhaps a decarbonisation roadmap to look at the future direction for your overall site. Here, we're very specifically interested in supporting you to just look at apologies, my screen slightly lost the the feed to the presentation, so I'd be very grateful if someone would be able to pick up just moving my slides along. So the amount that you can claim for these studies, the minimum threshold would be £30,000, and this is against the total costs of your application. So we recognise that feasibility studies can sometimes be quite low value, but obviously high value in terms of what they might be able to achieve. So you could apply with a study that was costing £30,000 in total. In that case, the grant that you would be claiming would be lower than that. And the maximum grant that we could offer you would be £7 million in total per study. The grant that you specifically can achieve would depend on a few subsidy intensity rules. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail later. But to give you an idea, if you're a large company, you could claim up to 50% of the costs that you incur from the study as a grant. And if you were a small company, that could go up to 70%. The scope of a study should generally be just looking at the one technology solution, as I described. But if you've got a technology solution that you think might be relevant to not just one site that you own, but perhaps you own multiple sites where the same technology could be deployed, in that case, you would be able to look at expanding the scope of your investigation to cover all of those sites, up to a maximum of 5. For engineering studies, much of the same applies. So again, at the end of the scheme, the idea would be that you're producing a report. Here it would be more in depth, so this should be enough information to help you to make a final investment decision into whether you would like to go ahead with your chosen technology solution. So it should look at the costs and the benefits of the project, things such as the health and safety considerations, and more detail in terms of the planning and risks and risk mitigation strategies that you might need to consider. The minimum costs for that study would need to be at least £50,000, and the maximum grant that we can offer you is £14 million. I say maximum because, as always with sort of government funding schemes, we do ask you to minimise the amount that you're asking for to just the amount that would allow you to go ahead with the project. So we've talked about maximum subsidy intensities. These are a guideline for how much you could possibly get, but if you can minimise the funding, we do ask that you do that. It will improve your application overall and mean we can fund more projects overall as well. And now I'll just talk a bit more about the eligible costs for the studies. So this is the scope of the types of costs that you can claim. And I mentioned that the end result of a study should be a written desk report. That means that we can't fund the costs, for example, of creating a pilot or demonstrating a prototype. These would be sort of more suited to some of the innovation programs that we run through BEIS, for example, through the Net Zero Innovation Portfolio Programme that Catherine mentioned. But if you're very specifically looking at one technology solution, the kinds of things that we could support you in doing would be the labour or the consultant, the engineering time costs that you would incur in carrying out that study. And to expand a bit more on the subsidy intensity rules that I mentioned, these will differ depending on the circumstances of your firm. So you can claim a higher proportion of grant against your eligible costs if you're a small company, for example, and the thresholds that would tell you what kind of category of company you are listed in this table here and also set out in our guidance. So if you were had a headcount of above 250 people or a turnover or balance sheet of above the values listed here, then you would count as a large company, and it would be the minimum thresholds that would apply to you for the grant allowances. You're also able to claim an uplift if you're located in certain assisted areas. There's a map within our guidance that will tell you whether or not your firm might be eligible to receive an uplift on the basis of where it's located. Those subsidy control rules that I just, subsidy intensity rules that I just mentioned carry over into the energy efficiency and deep decarbonisation strands that I'm now going to talk about. So for the energy efficiency deployment strand, the minimum threshold, so the minimum grant that we can offer you is £100,000. So you must make sure when you're looking at your eligible costs and the amount of grant that you can claim, that that is at least £100,000. And if you do have any questions about that, please do come and talk to phase, and we can help you to determine whether or not you're likely to meet that threshold for the project that you have. The maximum grant that we can offer you is £14 million, and again, there are different subsidy intensities depending on your circumstances. Catherine outlined the broader scope of the energy efficiency competition, and we'll come back a bit later and talk more about specific technology details. And really the purpose of this strand is to make sure that at the end of the project, once you've completed it, you should be ready to operate that technology that you've just installed and therefore achieve the energy savings that you've anticipated. For deep decarbonisation, and I'll apologise quickly now because some of the information for energy efficiency has carried across into this slide, so afterwards we'll make sure that this slide is updated with the correct information. The main thing to note here is that we recognise that deep decarbonisation projects are often more expensive and more complex than energy efficiency projects, and by their nature they tend not to have a payback. Therefore, the amount of grant we can give you is higher, so again it will range from £100,000, but in this circumstance it would range up to £30 million. And the aid intensities that we'll offer are also higher, so these would range from 50% to 70% overall. And again, at the end of the project, the intention would be that you're able to install and begin to operate or be ready to operate the decarbonisation technology. The eligible costs for the deployment strands of the competition are quite different to studies, as you would expect. So we're trying to support the capital costs of installing new equipment or retrofitting existing equipment within the boundaries of your site. Catherine mentioned that we can't support the operating costs that might be associated with, for example, a switch to a lower carbon but more expensive fuel. But we can help you to bring down that upfront capital cost of installing the project in the first place. So this could cover the capital material expenses that you incur, the subcontractor costs and the direct labour costs from installation. There's a really important thing to note here, which is that we do require you to state what your reference investment would be. So we're really interested in making sure that our grant funding is targeting only specific elements of investments that are related to achieving either an energy efficiency or a decarbonisation saving. In some scenarios that will be quite easy to define. So for example, if you were to install a standalone piece of equipment such as a heat recovery unit within your existing process, the full cost of that would be eligible. The whole reason for installing that is to achieve the energy efficiency benefit. In other cases, you might be installing a piece of equipment that is more part of your standard industrial process. So there are perhaps the decarbonisation or energy efficiency benefits associated with installing a higher spec piece of equipment, but it's also a piece of equipment that you might otherwise have replaced anyway, or might otherwise have benefits towards the productivity, etc. of your firm. So what we want to do is make sure that we've separated out those costs, and we ask you to do that by providing a reference case investment. So this would typically be what the cost of a like-for-like replacement of that equipment would be versus the cost of a higher spec piece of equipment that would achieve those energy efficiency or decarbonisation savings. And finally, so far I've been talking about single proposals, but of course you're not limited to just one proposal or one application within the Ietf competition. If you do have multiple projects or studies that you'd like to take through the competition, then you are allowed in certain circumstances to aggregate these together. And the reasons for doing that might be, for example, in the deployment competition, we recognise that the £100,000 minimum grant threshold can be quite steep, particularly for smaller companies. Therefore, what you're able to do if you have a number of smaller deployment projects is aggregate those together and make sure that you can meet that minimum threshold. And we don't allow you to do that for studies just because the studies thresholds are already quite low. The other benefit to doing this would be that some of the application process would be slightly streamlined, so you'd only be answering certain questions once. But please do note that any proposal that you submit to us, whether it's in an aggregated application or separated out across different applications, will all be judged independently and go through the assessment process independently. There are further rules within the guidance about how this can work. And now just very quickly, I'll touch on more of the technology specific rules. So these apply for energy efficiency projects, whether that be a study or a deployment project, and deep decarbonisation proposals as well, again, whether that be a study or a deployment proposal. So we focused quite a lot on the fact that the fund is aiming to support deployment, so real world deployment of technologies at existing industrial sites. For deep decarbonisation technologies, we recognise that some of these are newer to the market, maybe not quite as tried and tested, and therefore we would support you in deploying or investigating a technology, provided it was at least at technology readiness 7. So that means that there would be a prototype available on the market that has been demonstrated in an operational environment. For energy efficiency technologies, which is slightly more advanced and more mature, we would expect that the technology solution that you've identified would be at least technology readiness level 8. So it should have been qualified through test and demonstration or have been proven in an operational environment. The types of energy efficiency technologies that would be in scope are very wide ranging. We're technology neutral, so we're interested in you coming to us and proposing what the most appropriate measure for your site would be. This could include, for example, technologies such as process control systems or individual controllable equipment, which would allow you to minimise your energy consumption. Could also include upgrades to your equipment. As I mentioned before, the really important thing there is just to think about what your counterfactual investment scenario would be. And then also in technologies such as heat recovery, heat pumps and so on that would save you energy on your site. Resource efficiency measures are also in scope. Here you must identify that there's a technological solution that's being imposed where you would need capital support, or you would need to carry out a study in order to investigate the benefits. And again, the outcome should be that you're able to show that there would be an energy saving within the boundaries of your own site. For deep decarbonisation, this is the newer element of the scheme, so I'll talk through some of the technologies in a little bit more detail. Many of the rules carry across from phase 1, where you were able to apply with a deep decarbonisation study. But as we're deploying these projects now, we're also interested in making sure that we're not locking in technologies that won't have a long-term net zero alignment. So there is a lot of detailed guidance around many of the technologies that I'll talk through, and I do really encourage you to go away and look at the guidance if you're considering any of these specific types of technology. And they span both fuel switching and also on-site carbon capture. So for fuel switching, the key principle that the Ietf works on is that you must be switching from an existing fuel towards a less carbon intensive fuel, and that less carbon intensive fuel shouldn't be more carbon intensive than the gas grid. So that's our effective benchmark on a good fuel switch. This could include switches from fossil fuels to electricity, waste energy, waste fuel, and so on. And there are a few more specific rules around this. And when you're doing a fuel switching proposal, the kinds of costs that we could support again would be the replacement or retrofitting of your equipment. Could include pipe work or transformers that would be needed on your site. And if you were obviously trying to connect into a large infrastructure, so perhaps a grid infrastructure, unfortunately through the Ietf we wouldn't be able to support any of the costs that you would incur from that connection. So we'd only support the on-site adaptations that you would need. Biomass is one of the eligible fuel switches that you can carry out, but recognising that biomass is a scarce resource and needs to be used carefully, we do minimise the circumstances in this competition round in which it can be used. So for example, you would need to demonstrate that you are using it in a high heat temperature process, so above 240 degrees. You'd also need to show that the biomass that you're using is from a sustainable feedstock. You should also be able to justify, and this counts for all of your proposals, that the reason you have for choosing the biomass is that it's sort of the most attractive or most commercially or sort of net zero aligned option for your site. Hydrogen is another option for you. So if you have plans, and you really do need to show to us that you've identified a viable hydrogen supply, that might be, for example, from a co-located supply on your own site, from an electrolysis plant, or you might have identified an external supplier with whom you've got quite a sound or high confidence in being able to get hydrogen from in the future. In that case, you can apply for a study to investigate the on-site adaptations that would be needed to switch to that. You would also be able to carry out a deployment project. There we really, again, we would test on whether your likelihood of your proposal going forward is sound and we have confidence in it. And we also need you to be able to demonstrate that you could switch to using that hydrogen fuel source within 5 years. And finally, on the technology elements for carbon capture, again, this might be something you're considering through the fund. Do note, as Catherine said, that we can only support you in the capital costs for a carbon capture project. Any ongoing costs associated with the running of that equipment or perhaps connecting into transport and storage networks wouldn't be supported directly through the Ietf. If that is required to make your project viable, then please consider looking at the other funding that Catherine mentioned, for example, through the cluster sequencing process. And again here, the real key is that you need to be able to demonstrate us that you have plans for either utilising the carbon that you've captured, or you have a means to transport and store the captured carbon later on. And then to touch on a few sort of common questions that we get in terms of what is in and out of scope of the fund. We mentioned that we can only support sort of projects that aim to decarbonise or reduce the energy consumption at existing sites. That means, therefore, if your proposal is to set up a new build site or to expand an existing site, unfortunately, we can't help you with the costs of making sure that that's low carbon and low energy consuming as possible. That wouldn't be eligible for our fund. We also couldn't support you in repairing or maintaining your existing equipment or bringing it up to minimum standards. And because we've got an industrial process focus, we can't support you with improvements to building lighting and space heating and so on. The production of fuels is not in scope. So some of the fuels that I just mentioned, such as hydrogen, we wouldn't be able to support you in the costs of setting up a hydrogen production facility. We also can't support the costs of renewable electricity generation, and there is other support available for this though. And if you have any questions around any of the technologies that are out of scope that I've mentioned, again, do get in touch with us. If the Ietf isn't suitable, we can try and help you to find another source of support. And CHP, I'd just like to really focus on, because we don't support CHP projects through our energy efficiency competition, but we do support CHP projects if there is an identified fuel switch that would help to decarbonise that facility. So you could apply with a CHP project through the decarbonisation competition, provided it's related to an industrial site. And I'll now pass on to my colleague, Bess Hume, who will talk about the application process.
Thanks very much, Lily. My name's Bess Hume, and I'll be talking you through some of the process points around how we will assess and then take projects forward. So as you can see from this slide, this is about the assessment of studies. Before I go into the detail of how we will be assessing the individual strands, I think just to make clear, the Ietf is a competitive fund, so projects will be ranked against one another. But I think it's important to make clear that projects within an individual competition strand will only be judged against one another. So you won't have deep decarbonisation deployment projects being compared to an energy efficiency study or any other kind of study. In terms of how the process works, the decision will be taken by BEIS. We have a grant award panel who will make recommendations to ministers for the final decision on who is successful once we've looked at the scores. And across all of the competition strands, it's probably worth sort of bringing out questions around value for money of the projects, the cost versus the benefits, and also what we call additionality or added value, which is basically, would this project have happened without government intervention, are really key for some of the decisions around whether or not projects will be taken forward. So as Lily said, there are 3 competition strands. For the study strand, there are 6 assessment criteria. You can see them on the slide there. For anyone who has looked at phase 1 of the Ietf, they will be familiar. They are also weighted, so once the scores have been allocated, they will then be weighted. In order to be successful, you will need to pass minimum quality thresholds. And perhaps just to highlight that you will be expected to provide a project plan and a risk register as part of the application. And that is in addition to the finance form, which I will come on to a bit later in the presentation. So moving on now to the assessment of the deployment strands. As I said, just to repeat, the different strands will not be assessed against one another, but there are similarities in the assessment process for both energy efficiency and deep decarbonisation deployment. For these competitions, there are 3 key criteria: the economic assessment, the transformational assessment, and the deliverability assessment. The economic assessment really aims to look at value for money, so we will be looking at the costs and the benefits of your proposal, the risks that the benefits will not be achieved, and also, as I mentioned previously, additionality. So would this project have gone ahead without government funding? There's a project benefits calculator. Again, anyone familiar with phase 1 will be familiar with some elements of this, although it is slightly different for this phase. And that's an Excel spreadsheet which you will download from the application website, from the application form, and then upload again. And I will come on in a bit more detail to what's contained in that later on. So the second criterion is around transformational, and this is really to help us understand how your proposal is compatible with government net zero commitments. We will ask you to justify your technology choices and show that your project is replicable or scalable. And for deep decarbonisation projects, we're also keen to understand the novel nature of those projects. The final assessment criteria for deployment is deliverability, which is quite a standard criterion for funds such as this. So we will ask you how you will deliver your project, your plan, your team, and your project management strategy, including risks. Once the assessment has been done, energy efficiency projects will be ranked according to the score on the economic assessment, and deep decarbonisation projects will be ranked according to the score for the transformational assessment. So that's something just to note, a difference in the way in which the 2 competition strands will be ranked following the assessment process. So on to some practicalities now. How to apply. I hope some of you at least have had a chance perhaps to look at the Ietf website, which then leads you on to the application form. Lily's already explained the concept of the lead applicant. It will be the lead applicant who needs to create an account and set up the application, but you can then invite others to collaborate on your application. So as Lily mentioned, there's the option to work with project partners, and you're able to invite those to work on the application form. But it is only the lead applicant who can submit the proposal. So they will need to take the lead in ensuring that all the information is there and that the proposal is complete and can be submitted. You can save your work at any stage and log back in to continue the application. So hopefully that helps to ensure it's as efficient as possible. And if you have any technology issues, please do get in touch. I'll be giving you more details on how to contact us later in the presentation. So we've talked a bit about the assessment process. Once you've been able to complete the full application form, then you'll need to submit it. Lily has already highlighted that the deadline for submission is 3 p.m. on the 6th of December. All the application documents must be submitted via the online application form. And you can see here on the slide a list of the documents which you will need to include in that application. So there's the finance form, which I will talk about shortly. And that is something you will need to fill out for every application. A completed project benefits calculator, that's only required for deployment. A completed Gantt chart, a completed risk register. And there may also be other supporting information which you wish to upload to support some of the answers that you've given. It's quite clearly indicated in the application form where you might want to give some additional information, and the option is there for you to upload those. I should say that for situations where you are aggregating a number of projects into one application, you will need to submit a separate project benefits calculator, Gantt chart and risk register for each of the proposals within your application form, but only one finance form per application. Again, this is all explained in the guidance, and we're very happy to talk people through it in more detail if there's anything there that is confusing. So moving on now to the finance form. You'll be asked to complete and upload a finance form detailing the sort of things that you might expect. So the costs which are attributable to the lead applicant and any project partners, the eligible costs, which Lily has covered, the grant amount that you are requesting, and information on the other sources of funding which you are using in order to ensure that this project can go ahead. It's your responsibility to ensure that these details are correct. I think Lily's already gone through some of the subsidy control rules and ensuring that you're compliant with those. And as Lily mentioned, we expect applicants to present the minimum funding necessary for the project to go ahead. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are applying for multiple projects in an aggregated application, then you will need to complete only one finance form for that application, but there will be separate tabs on the finance form for each proposal within that application. Again, it's explained clearly in the guidance, and there's also guidance on the finance form, and we're always here should you have any questions to ask about the detail, just to make sure that you're able to fill that in accurately. Moving on now to the other document which may be of particular interest, so the project benefits calculator. I should say with both the finance form and the project benefits calculator, you will find those within the online application form, and then you will need to download it and then fill it in and upload it. So the project benefits calculator, this is for deployment projects only. You will be asked for a number of data sets. So we will be looking at things like the energy consumption, the fuels you're using, production levels, greenhouse gas emissions, and we're looking at both before and after the intervention that you're hoping to make through the Ietf. We'll also be looking via the online application form for you to outline your calculations, your assumptions, all the sources underpinning the inputs to the calculator. And this is one of the opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, to upload any supplementary or supporting information as evidence. And your application will be judged on the strength of that, that supporting information. As I mentioned, if you're applying for multiple projects in an aggregated application, you will need to complete one of these project benefit calculators for each of those applications. That's a bit different from the finance form, but you will need to complete one for each. And that's because, as we mentioned earlier, we will be looking at each of those proposals individually. So it's important we have all of that information. So now to talk a little bit about what happens once you've submitted your application. Lily talked a little bit about this at the beginning, so I'll just go through in a little more detail. First of all, we will do the eligibility checks to make sure that you are indeed eligible for the Ietf and that your project is eligible. We'll then go through the assessment and award process. So each application is marked by 3 assessors. And as we've said before, applications for the same competition are assessed against the same set of criteria. The scores will then be moderated and projects will be ranked and considered by the BEIS award panel before going to ministers. Successful projects will be required to pass all the due diligence checks, and you need to be willing to give up the time and the sort of the effort needed to go through those checks, and also then to accept the terms and conditions of BEIS's grants offer letter and grant funding agreement. And you'll find a draft of the grant funding agreement on our landing page. It is a draft, it may change, but it will give you an idea of what the grant funding agreement looks like. And those two things, the due diligence and the acceptance of the terms and conditions, are vital before the final grant funding award can be made. You'll be notified by email whether your application has passed the initial assessment stage, and assessor feedback will be provided to all applicants. And we hope that if you aren't successful perhaps for this window, that feedback might prove useful for future windows should you wish to apply again. One further thing to mention, there is an additional scrutiny stage for deep decarbonisation projects requesting more than 3 million, and for energy efficiency projects requesting more than 7 million. And this may require you to be involved in a phone call with BEIS officials and or assessors. And the point of this really is to ensure we really are funding projects in line with the ambitions of the Ietf scheme, and also to help the assessors to gain a clearer understanding of the information that you've put in the application form. And any calls of that nature will take place before the grant award panel. So it's really about deepening our understanding and making sure we make good decisions. So looking a little bit ahead, as Lily mentioned, we've tried to ensure that we have a number of application windows so that we can fit in as best we can with investment cycles and other cycles within industry and business. So if you are unable to apply in the current window, there will be further opportunities to apply in 2022. The guidance gives some more details. Hopefully, we're looking for further windows in January, May and October of 2022, although there is some flexibility there. So I think our main sort of advice and encouragement would be to apply as early as possible. As Lily mentioned, all the funding must be spent by March 2025, particularly if your project perhaps has a longer lead-in time, a bit more complicated. Please get your applications in as early as possible. Don't wait for the last minute unless you absolutely must. The future competition windows will follow a similar format to this competition window, so please do look out for further details as they're published. And I think I've promised several times to tell you how to get in touch with us. So as you can see here, we have an email, ietf@beis.gov.uk. Please do get in touch with us with queries and questions, any that perhaps aren't answered later today as well. Thank you very much for listening. I'll now pass back to Jenny, who will take you through the next section of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Bess, and to Lily as well. That was a great explanation of all the many competition details. And we've had lots and lots of questions come in. So we're going to move over to the Q&A session now. So I think all of our speakers are online to be able to answer your questions. So first up, we have a question from Chiara Zanaro. Is carbon capture from a biomethane plant eligible? So Salman, would you like to take that one? And she did ask a follow-on question as well about whether if the CO2 was captured at the biomethane plant, could it be used by a food manufacturer, and would that make it eligible? I think you're on mute. Oh, there we go. I can hear you now. Salman?
I'll perhaps take that one just quickly.
That would be great. Thanks, Lily.
So for biomethane plants, as we mentioned, energy production as standalone facility wouldn't be in scope of the ITF. So biomethane refinery wouldn't be in scope for our funding. If you were combusting biomethane on site and that was part of your industrial process, then you would be able to apply to capture the carbon on that process. But if you've got a standalone biomethane site, unfortunately, that wouldn't be in scope for our fund. If you would like to talk to us about that, please do, and we might be able to find another alternative source of funding for you. In terms of utilisation, so again, the types of funding that the IETF can support is for the carbon capture equipment itself. We're interested in what you're doing with carbon after you've captured it, but we wouldn't support sort of the setup of new utilisation processes, for example.
And the next one's for you as well, actually. So we've had a question from Paul Sweeney about whether the funding is available to local authority clients. And we had a later question around another site, a government site where the activities were eligible, but it's not an industrial site. So would either of those be eligible?
So in that case, they wouldn't be at first glance, but please do get in touch with us so that we can learn a bit more about your proposals. The IETF is targeted at the private sector, so trying to bring down essentially the upfront capital costs or general investment costs of these projects to investable levels, so trying to help with those private paybacks that companies are experiencing. But that being said, if you do have arrangements with private companies, then those private companies might be eligible to apply in their own right.
And then we've had a few questions around solar energy. So first of all, on solar thermal, would solar thermal be in scope? And can it be used as kind of fuel switching option to switch to solar thermal for your industrial process?
I can take that.
Oh, lovely. Simon.
Yep. Yeah, so solar thermal will only be eligible where the heat is used in an industrial process. And of course, solar electricity generation would not be permissible under any circumstances.
That's great. That's answered my next question as well. Thank you, Samuel, for that. Our next question is from Ashley Shaw, who asks, we're a UK company, but we were thinking about deploying technologies at sites outside of the UK. So would that be eligible for the IETF? Catherine, would you like to take that question?
Yes, I will. So any IETF grant funding needs to be for a site that is in England, Wales or Northern Ireland. We are interested in having positive spillover effects across the country and internationally. So if you tell us that by our investment in a technology in England, Wales or Northern Ireland, it will help with the global climate crisis, that's super, but the IETF investment has to be here.
That's great, thank you. And another one for Lily, I think. Demetrios has asked, is the flexibility of industrial processes in scope, or does there have to be an energy saving?
So I think in that case, Dimitri, it might be good if you get in touch with us just to expand a bit more on your specific proposal. There does need to be an energy efficiency outcome or a decarbonisation outcome for many of the projects that you're applying to us with. If you were looking to transition an industrial process, but there wasn't a direct energy efficiency or decarbonisation saving, then that probably wouldn't be in scope for our fund.
Okay, lovely. Next question from Kashmir Lohal. Do we need to pay back the fund similar to a loan? Catherine, would you like to take that one?
So the IETF is grant funding rather than loan funding, so you don't have to pay back your contribution. We don't fund 100% of a project, so you do need to put in some money of your own or find the match funding from elsewhere. The only circumstances in which we'd come after you to repay money would be if you hadn't met your grant funding agreement terms. So for example, if you told us that you'd bought a piece of equipment but you hadn't, then we would reserve the right to ask you to pay the money back. But essentially we're a grant fund. Okay,
lovely. And next question, I think this one might be for Bess. Fayal Gohar, very sorry about my pronunciations. Is the gap between the funding being awarded and the project starting a year? I think because we mentioned this, projects can start as late as March 2023. Does it have to start as late as that?
No, and in fact, we encourage people to start their projects as soon as they can. We've given that extra bit of time just because we know for some projects there's a lot of lead-in time, but really the sooner the better. And of course, one thing to be mindful of is the deadlines for completing the project. So obviously not wanting to leave everything to the last minute, but no, it's really just a date by which projects must start rather than something to aim for.
Okay, lovely, thank you. The next one was an anonymous question. can the industrial site, so the end user, apply in collaboration with a technology provider, a sort of third-party equipment provider, where the third party owns and operates the technology as a kind of efficiency as a service model? Would that be in scope for the Ietf? So Lily, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, happy to. So absolutely, provided that you met the technology eligibility requirements that we've set out, that kind of arrangement could be facilitated by the competition. We would, however, require that the lead applicant in all circumstances was always the manufacturing site or the industrial site. So you would need to work out between you how that would work in practice, both at the practical stage of applying for the fund. You'll have the option both to access the application portal and both to input into that. So if you as the energy service provider were doing more of the kind of technical work, you might take on more of the application, for example. But in terms of our contractual arrangements, that would always be with the main industrial site.
The next one is from Maria Daphne Mangriotis. I hope, sorry about that. She's asked a question about the Scottish Ietf. I'll be at the briefing tomorrow for the Scottish Ietf briefing event. So I'd say come along to that. We'll cover all the details relating to that competition, which is separate to the BEIS Ietf. So do come along to that or get in touch with me if you need a link to the event. The next question as well from Fayul Gohar is, do we have to submit a feasibility study as part of our application to the deployment competition? So again, I can answer that. No, you don't have to submit a feasibility study, but in order to complete the application form, you are going to need to provide a certain amount of detail. So it could be useful to have done some sort of study, but you don't have to bid into our feasibility competition before bidding into the deployment competition. You can go straight to deployment. Right, we are really tight for time. We'll do two more. There is a question about space heating, so I just wanted to cover this one. Maybe Salman, you could do this one. Gareth Banks asks, can the Ietf be used for low carbon space heating equipment such as infrared?
Unfortunately, the Ietf will not support any building efficiency upgrade measures, which include space heating.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, I know there were a lot more questions that have come in, and I promise you we've kept a record of who asked what question. So we will get back in touch with you after today's event with the answers to your questions. But thank you all very much for contributing. We're now going to move over to the Menti-Meter Survey. So I'm going to very quickly explain how we're going to do this survey, and then I'm going to let you go off and have a well-earned cup of tea, and you can do the survey while you're drinking your tea or coffee. So as I said at the beginning, we would really like to get some feedback from you, partly to gauge how much interest there is in this competition window, but also to get some feedback from you on next year's competition windows, and maybe what you would like to see. What are the barriers that are stopping you from applying to the Ietf? There's only 5 questions on this survey. You don't need to download any software. Either scan the QR code that's on the screen now, or go to the website if you're on your computer and type in that code. And then the first question will come up, and just click your way through, answer that survey while you're having a cup of tea. And we will see you back here at, I think it is 11:20. So please do come back and join us. We'll be hearing from our case study speakers and also our technology pitches. So it's well worth returning after the break. Thank you very much, everyone. Hi everyone, welcome back, and I hope you had time to have a cup of tea or coffee over that break. I do apologise about the Menti-Meter code. For some reason, the technology decided to change it overnight. My colleague Louise has put the correct code into the chat box on YouTube, so please do still fill in that survey if you haven't had a chance to do that so far. So for the next section of today's webinar, we're going to be sharing some ideas of things that you could do at your industrial site, as well as sharing some technologies that are eligible for the Ietf. And I have very grateful to two of our projects that were funded in phase 1. We have our first presentation from Owen Bailey. He's the Innovation Manager for Celsa UK, based in South Wales, and he's going to describe their energy efficiency deployment project. So over to you, Owen.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'm, as Jenny said, I'm Owen Bailey, the Innovation Manager for Celsa UK. We are a manufacturing company based in Cardiff. What I'll do is I'll go through very quickly some of the information about the company itself and who we are and what we do, and then I'll go into some detail on the project itself and how BEIS and Ietf fund helped us to do this. So Celsa is it's a Spanish-owned company, but in the UK we are a steel maker that produces steel using scrap material, scrap steel products. We process 1.2 million tons a year, and we produce 1 million tons of product for the construction sector. We're fairly good in terms of our existing carbon footprint in comparison to other steel makers in the UK and across Europe, but we have an ambition to make sure that we reach carbon zero by 2030 is our target. What we do, the products we produce are split into the two different rolling mills that we have on site at Cardiff. We send our scrap through our EAF melt plant. We create billets, and those billets then are sent to our two rolling mills, the rod and bar mill, which produces rebar and wire, and then the section mill, which produces channels and angle sections for construction reinforcement. We have a fairly wide footprint in the UK. We have as you can see from the map here, we have the scrap processing facilities in purple. We have our main plant here in Cardiff, and then we have fabrication and mesh producers across the UK. And Celsa UK is made up of a number of different brands that those in the construction sector would have come across. We have a capacity to produce 900,000 tons of reinforcement steel for major projects, and we're also certified to supply to the nuclear sector. And we like to focus on some of those larger iconic projects, as we call them, which are looking to build the UK, the infrastructure for the UK. And we also invest in skills, and we certainly invest in apprenticeship schemes. We see that there's a number of gaps at the moment between academic and industry, and what we try to do is fill those gaps with our own approaches to traineeships and apprenticeships. So we're part of the Investors in People and the Kickstart scheme here in South Wales. We also engage with the wider community, both from a local area, but also then as part of the within the South Wales industrial cluster activities, and this kind of aligns our decarbonisation policy and activities aligned to that of the South Wales industry cluster. So we're very much part of collaborating with these clusters, and we're also signed up to the UN Global Compact. So on a group basis, we have a commitment to our sustainability goals, on the UN sustainability goals as we move forward. Just so the project we invested in, or the project that Ietf helped us invest in, was to do with our energy supply into the electrical arc furnace, which is a strong consumer of electricity, and ultimately because of the scrap mix of the material that we process, the feedstock material, the energy isn't consistent. The energy supply or the energy draw isn't consistent. So we needed something to help us fluctuate, to balance out the harmonics in that energy supply, and so we set about to find support to help us install an SVC, a static VAR compensator, which is a fairly significant bit of equipment to help us balance out the supply from the grid to our operations. I'm certainly not the technical expert in this area, so if you do need any more knowledge or information, please come to me after this presentation, and I can point you in the right direction to the right people to speak to about the technical elements of this project. Some of the benefits that we see from this, or we're going to see, I should say, because this project is ongoing at the moment. We obviously we had the funding as part of phase 1, so the project now is starting to move forward, and these are some of the things that we hope to see from this project. So a more balanced grid, a more stable grid for local supply. Certainly, if we have a more efficient and effective supply of resources or energy resource into our process, we can then have a much more control over what we can do in terms of decarbonisation going forward. So this is certainly a major step forward in terms of helping us become more resource efficient, to look at our overall net zero carbon ambitions, and it's kind of the first step in our pathway moving forward to help us reduce the overall emissions from what we do. One of the reasons why we want to do this is not just for Celsa as a business, but for the UK industries and UK economy, to make sure that we are processing resources that can be supplied from the UK as opposed to importing raw material feedstock. And so therefore making sure that we're a lot more resource efficient within the UK boundaries, and effectively then adding a lot more value to the UK economy. There's an estimated 2.5 million pounds of saving to be gained from this in terms of the energy efficiency and the additional benefits to the consumption of the furnace and the resource, the materials we need to process those scrap resource. We see that there's an increase in production available from this as well, because again we have a continuity of that of energy supply will really help us to deliver on a better, more efficient, and more effective, and more productive process. And the overall carbon savings, as you can see on this, there's nearly 10,000 tons of CO2 per year saving on this, just on this bit of equipment alone. So it's again a major step forward in helping us to produce effectively what we'd like to see as a zero carbon steel. A bit more detail on the decisions to go with Hitachi ABB as the preferred supplier. We went through a series of procurement decision-making processes to make sure that we had the best of what was available, and so we decided to go with ABB. But you can see that the system that they're supplying on the graph in terms of the harmonics of the EAF without the SVC attached is in the grey, and ultimately what this represents for us in terms of the overall harmonics in the process, and it gives us a lot increased savings and productivity in that. Again, a bit more of a schematic drawing as where it sits in the overall process, but it just for those who are more technically minded, you can see how we kind of detail this into our overall process. This is a slide just to demonstrate how it fits into the wider agenda, the wider concepts we're looking at, and particularly that within the South Wales Industry Cluster. Ultimately, when we're part of this cluster and we're involved in the plan for clean growth within the cluster activities, again, it's an Innovate UK funded project which is helping us as a cluster move forward. There is 30 partners in this project, and one of the outcomes of this is to develop clean growth hubs, and these are all based around the anchor companies in different parts of the region. And the idea will be that from those anchor companies will be new industries, new opportunities, new enterprises, and all of these are based upon the quality of energy inputs. So this again is helping us to build on a bigger picture, a much more systems approach to what it is we're trying to do and what it is we can do. Also, Celsa is part of what we call the circular economy, and what it is known as circular economy in terms of utilizing resources more effectively. We are the UK's largest recycler in terms of volume of tons of material. So we want to build on that, and how we see ourselves doing this is to develop collaboration, and collaborating with the cluster, collaborating with BEIS, and collaborating with our wider communities is a way of us guaranteeing that we can develop more robust systems and solutions to help us move forward and help the community and the region and the economy move forward. And the SVC as a project was certainly the kind of the baseline or the base project to help us move this forward, this agenda forward. And ultimately, this is not something we could have done on our own. We needed the support of BEIS. We need the support of the structured approach of project development within the Innovate UK portal. But ultimately, the fund itself is really what's helped us to move this forward. We couldn't put ourselves into any further debt to try and decarbonize, to try and get us on our pathway towards net zero. So this certainly was a way of helping us to move this agenda forward. And yeah, we're looking forward to continuing this project and hopefully participate in other projects as we go forward for this agenda of decarbonizing and making what we do a lot more energy efficient. So that was a very quick rundown, and that's me. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I mean, that was great. And hopefully that has helped people in the audience to think about what they can do on their sites as well. So our second case study presentation today is from Mike Wales, Director of European Strategy at Phillips 66. And the site that the project is based at is in Humber, and Mike's going to describe their decarbonisation study from phase 1. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny, and good morning. So just move on. I think the first slide was set up just with an overview of who Phillips 66 are. Not very well known in the UK, more of a US company, but we do have a significant asset at the Humber Refinery in Humberside, as was mentioned. So the company is really, it's energy manufacturing. So it's not oil and gas. We don't own the upstream, but we're producing the fuels. We own the midstream assets like pipelines and terminals. We have a chemicals division, as well as marketing and specialties. So about 14,000 employees with a headquarters in Houston, Texas. So moving on to the next slide, the Humber Refinery. So as Ian was just mentioning, in the top right, what you've got is the industrial clusters around the UK and where the industrial emissions tend to be centred. And yeah, South Wales and the Humber are the two biggest clusters. You can see, the scale of whether it's a problem or it's an opportunity. But to decarbonise, you've really got to be targeting that heavy industrial area where you can get the capital efficiency to decarbonise at an industrial scale. So the refinery itself, we employ around 1,000 people. And what really sets us apart is we're Europe's only producer of specialty graphite products through our coking facility. A lot of that goes into anodes for steel recycling, which we just talked about on the prior presentation. But what we're really seeing now is a demand for that specialty graphite into electric vehicles. It's part of the battery there, and also into consumer electronics. So if you've got a smartphone, electric vehicle, you've probably got a bit of our coke in that product. Also working with the Department for Transport in new low carbon fuels, reducing the carbon intensity of what's going in at the front end and producing new low carbon feedstocks and products. So heavily involved in that Humber industrialization, which has been sort of overseen by the Humber Industrial Cluster Plan, which we're part of. And within that, we're heavily involved in two of the key projects. We are a partner in the Humber Zero project, which is part of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund Phase 2. So one of, I think, about 6 to 7 projects that were successful in that at the start of this year. And that's looking at industrial scale carbon capture at the refinery and an adjacent combined heat and power plant. And we're also a partner in the Gigastack, which is the UK's leading green hydrogen project, 100 megawatts, using offshore wind, which comes in from Hornsey 1 and 2 to a substation just 2 miles down the road from the refinery, using that to convert to green hydrogen through electrolysis and refueling the Humber Refinery that way. So moving on to how heater refueling fits within that. as I mentioned, we've been involved in what's called the ISCF, the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. And in 2020, there was a phase 1 study. We did a lot of work on that, working with a consultant board. And they looked at the various things we'd need to do at the refinery to decarbonise. And we've got more than 50 heaters. You know, there's not going to be one way to decarbonise such an industrial scale facility. So what was really identified was it was a combination. We're looking at carbon capture, which is Humber Zero, which I talked about before, and hydrogen refueling. So for those heaters which are further away, hard to access, or have variable rates that don't fit carbon capture, hydrogen refueling really sort of comes into its own at that point. So that's going to be green, but it's also potentially going to be blue hydrogen as well. So we need to look at, you know, how do we do that? Gigastack's looking at the production of that hydrogen, but we also need, you know, to look at how we'd have to reconfigure the refinery at the assets on the refinery even to consume that. So mentioned here, it means big scale, 400,000 tons of CO2 emissions that we're targeting through hydrogen refueling. And that's really what this opportunity through the Ietf study is going to let us tackle. So moving on to the next slide, please. So this really to give you, you know, what we're going to do within this heater refueling study. I'm going to look at several things around the configuration of the furnaces themselves, the pipe work, because, you know, hydrogen has a lower heat capacity by volume than natural gas, so there's reconfiguration of the logistics in the refinery as well as the furnaces. We're going to do things like computational fluid dynamics, and that's what that graphic on the right-hand side is showing you. It's really a way to model how the heat moves through the furnace as you get a, you know, the faster flame pattern with hydrogen. So there's lots of things that are going to change within the furnace as you replace natural gas with hydrogen. That's really what this is all about understanding. So in addition to that theoretical modeling and the engineering studies on the assets, we also have the physical testing. So we're going to go to burner manufacturers and do real hydrogen testing, taking the natural gas out and seeing how they handle hydrogen and how we'd have to model, or how we'd have to change those out at the refinery itself. And we're going to do a commercial scale evaluation, look at the cost of that and how much is optimum. You know, are we going to go to 100% plus? We're certainly hoping it's going to be 90% plus hydrogen, but we're going to look at that optimal as we see how the flame pattern and things change as you add hydrogen to the mix. And it's going to also inform the work. You know, as I mentioned, we've got the Humber Industrial Cluster Plan. You know, we're looking at hydrogen refueling. There's an adjacent refinery. There's a combined heat and power plant. There's multiple industrial assets that go within that 12 million tons of emissions in the Humber, which we looked at on that second slide, I think. So that's really a key learning which can be applied both in the Humber, but in the UK in general. I mean, these are industrial furnaces which you get in any major industrial facility. So it's applicable both in the UK and globally. So probably just move on. I think it's the last slide to wrap up. So really just how that moved forward. We saw through the Gigastack project and the ISCF phase 1 that we needed to understand that practical piece at the refinery is how you'd reconfigure. So this work, the bid is to do the technical evaluation, the budget, etc. We're going to work with the specialists to really understand how that work will be done. So we submitted the bid in the first phase 1 through Ietf, and we're very pleased to be successful in that. So that project is kicking off this month. We're gearing up, getting all the team pulled together right now, and that's going to be a 12-month study. So really appreciative to the Ietf funding for the opportunity to do this.
That's great. Thank you very much, Mike, and thank you for the praise. That's always good to hear. Glad it was useful, and I hope you do continue and bid into the deployment competition. We keep our fingers crossed for you.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move on to a little bit of audience participation. So we asked people as they were registering if they would like to do a 2-minute pitch of their technology or their industrial site to you guys, the audience. These are all technologies or sites that we know are eligible for the Ietf. So we're going to rattle through them. To our pictures, I would just say, a little reminder, it is only 2 minutes, and you know I'm ruthless, so I will keep you to 2 minutes. You can see the running order on the screen at the moment. So first up, we have Karen Hall from Ameresco. Over to you.
Hi, everyone. I want to introduce Ameresco to you. Wherever you are on your journey to net zero carbon, Ameresco can help you. Ameresco have a comprehensive collection of energy efficiency and renewable energy solutions. Our clients have already saved millions of tons of CO2 while enjoying significant energy cost savings. And in the last round, we helped one of our clients gain a successful award from the Ietf fund. Next slide, please. So what we can do for you, we can analyse your energy usage and identify potential energy savings and decarbonisation measures from our comprehensive technology portfolio. We can design and implement those improvements for you and provide guaranteed savings. We can provide ongoing operations and maintenance support. Ameresco can help you apply for funding, help you manage your compliance, and help you in the development of strategies for energy management ongoing and for achieving a net zero plan. A project for us might include multiple measures: heat pumps integrated with waste heat recovery, process optimization, load management, as well as power from renewable sources such as solar and wind. We unusually can also help you provide finance for those opportunities through a variety of funding models for our projects that that give you the opportunity to choose whether your infrastructure upgrades are on or off balance sheet, with budget neutral options where projects are paid for by their savings. Our contract options include the traditional lump sum and reimbursable engineering, procurement and construction, all the way to power purchase agreements, energy as a service agreements, design, build, own, operate and maintain agreements, and performance contracting agreements. Remember, wherever you are on your journey to net zero, Ameresco can help.
That was perfect, Karen. That is how you do a 2-minute pitch. Thank you very much for that. Okay, and next up we have Rajan Pandahar from Q10. So over to you, Rajan. Are you on mute? Rajan, are you there?
Me.
There we almost. Try again.
Yeah, we are okay now. You muted me. Good morning, everyone. My name is Rajan. I represent QIO Technologies. This is a new play which is very focused on delivering artificial intelligence-based industrial IoT software propositions to accelerate energy transformation, to provide for energy savings, to reduce carbon footprint, to provide real-time ESG reporting. Next slide, please. We are a team of about 35 people spread across India and Europe. We have been consistently a part of the Gartner Magic Quadrant for the technology that we have created, and our value proposition is very simple. If I could go to the next slide. Our value proposition is very simple. When you look at an asset in the industrial sector, which could be a production line, a heat pump, a boiler, a compressor, or even a paint shop in an automotive environment, our first product, Foresight Optimize, all about how do you optimize either energy production, how do you optimize energy efficiency, how do you optimize production efficiency, waste, and quality. This product has been successfully implemented in a number of enterprises around the world. We can typically implement it in 2 to 4 weeks with the objective for multi-year deployment, and have established a track record of delivering anywhere between 5 to 20% of cost savings. It's just not Foresight Optima when it comes to energy optimization or carbon reduction. We go further into the life cycle of an asset, wherein we could maintain the asset by looking at whether it needs any predictive maintenance and subsequently service the asset. So do reach out to us. We can add significant value in the whole process. We are seeking partners who we could partner with to pursue this grant opportunity. Thank you very much. Jenny?
Apologies. Yeah, thank you very much. That was great. Again, another great 2-minute pitch, stuck to time. Just to say, audience, if you do want to connect with any of the pitches that you're seeing today and our case study speakers, then they are all on the Ietf networking platform. So you'll be able to ask any questions when you join with them on there. So next up, we have Stephen Welburn from Energy Nest.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, everybody. Good morning, folks. And thank you, Olivia, for the opportunity. So yes, Energy Nest, we are the thermal battery company. So our interest is in thermal energy storage. The organisation, we are headquartered in Norway. It's a young organisation. We do have offices in Spain, Germany, and the UK. Changing slides. The innovation has been recognised early this year. Infra Capital, which is the infrastructure arm of the FTSE 100 group, M&G, recognised the opportunity and the need throughout for growing and deploying thermal energy storage. So Energy Nest was lucky enough to receive a major investment from Infra Capital early this year, about 110 million. So we are growing fast, and this shows where the market's going. Next slide, please. So the concept is reasonably straightforward. We work within industry on either waste heat recovery or electrification of industry. We make heat available when it is required, not necessarily when it is available. The product is modular, it's easily deployed. We're rating from tens of megawatt hours thermal up to hundreds of megawatt hours thermal. We're supplying process heat, steam, saturated steam, superheated steam. Energy Nest, we're able to design, manufacture, deploy, and now with the backing of Infra Capital, we can even provide project funding and energy as a service. Although we have projects underway within Europe, we have so far new to the UK. And so what we are seeking is manufacturers who are using heat, process heat within intermittent duties, and the thermal battery would give them the buffer between heat available and heat supply. So we're looking for reaching out to manufacturers and partners to maybe jointly support an application over the next stage of funding. Thanks again for listening. And Jenny, I think I've got 1 minute 57. That's pretty good.
Perfect, you are. Very good, Stephen. And next up, we have Sally Lawrence Archer from Efenco. So over to you, Sally.
Good morning. My name is Sally Lawrence Archer, thank you, from Positive Concepts. We're representing the UK entity of Efenco, or Future Energy Conversion, a company with roots in Estonia. Efenco has developed a proprietary technology which improves fuel combustion efficiency by over 18% using a plasma-assisted combustion in industrial applications while breaking down emissions. This could be for LNG, hydrogen, or other fuels. The technology uses a small and robust multi-layer device to harvest waste heat from the combustion chamber to create plasma without using any additional energy, resulting in a lower fuel usage and reduced emissions as less fuel is burned to achieve the same energy output. We are already engaging with large international petroleum and energy partners and are working with experts, including Professor Philip Martin, who's a professor in the Department of Chemical Engineering and Analytical Science at Manchester University, who's able to offer an independent perspective on this exciting new technology. Our testing is also in conjunction with universities in Estonia. Next slide, please. The technology is called HERC, High Energy Ray Ceramic, and inside the chip is a device that makes it all happen. It represents a step change in the industry with the development of a small, robust, economical, but perhaps most importantly, a retrofit modification that increases efficiency and reduces emissions. As I said, in excess of 18% at the moment, and we are expecting to improve on that percentage. We will be launching the technology in time for COP26, including a demonstration of the tech using a standard domestic boiler, which we believe starts to imply the vast applications for this technology. We're in the final stages of patenting and the final qualification stage for industrial processing applications, and are excited about starting to explore other applications. Importantly, we've already secured over €1 million through the Estonian Business Angel Network, 70% of which will be matched by the EC and Estonian government Archimedes retro funding system. We're seeking validated UK industrial partners to conduct further testing and validation for various applications and to raise awareness. Many thanks.
That's great. Thank you very much, Sally. That's perfect. And next we have Mark Prince from BEP.
Hi there, everybody. So my company is BEP Surface Technologies. We're based in Bury, Manchester, and we think the world leaders in precision electroplating and finishing. We're involved in some quite remarkable projects with UK defence and nuclear industry in terms of electroplating. We drive innovation as well in high-level surface finishing, making finishes that are far fractions of human hair. We're an SME, just 40 people, based in Bury. We're a minnow, but with some giant ideas. You can move the slide, please. So I doubt that we're going to have any services to offer many of you guys, but we are a potential partner with you. We want to try to not only be the leader in plating in the way that we are, we want to be the leader in the way that plating is applied. So we're looking to precisely control the energy put into the electroplating process through sensors, feedback loops, chemical analysis, and the highest technology rectifiers. Electroplating has traditionally been a black art, but we intend to use modern technology, chemistry, and power management systems to reduce our energy consumption by a factor of 3. Yes, we're problem solvers at heart, and if you've got any plating issues, we can sort them, but mainly partners and services that we seek. We want energy scientists and control equipment manufacturers. We want people who are expert in spreading the word of our innovation in the energy field to others in our plating field. A lot of people have said, should we reach out to them in the context of this presentation? Well, we'd like people to reach out to ours who can help us create this control system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. And now moving on to Michael Reed from Solar Polar.
Good morning, everyone. Solar Polar has a mission to create low-cost solar thermally driven products. Latest product is, I think, probably the most world-beating of all of them. It is a solar concentrated heat gathering device. Next slide, please. We have a patented technology that does concentration of solar heat. Concentrated solar is not at all new. What is new is that this is very much lower cost, an order of magnitude compared to our competitors. We've achieved it by printing our concentrator rather than forming it out of metal. That concentrates on a fairly standard collector tube, and the difference really is that we're able to provide heat at high efficiency at higher temperatures. So a traditional tube would give you something around only up to 800 degrees centigrade at high efficiency. We can give up to 250 degrees centigrade at high efficiency. And we're looking for partners really who need the high temperature process heat. So in distilling or the plastics processing industry, or people who want to find and use industrial steam, but generate it at 0 carbon. This is a 0 carbon emissions device. It's very simple. We have patented it, and it is one that we want to find partners for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was great. Thank you. Now moving on to our next pitch, I just need to check, is Paula Dixon available from Alstrom? Oops, apologies. No, okay. I think then the next one is Dr. Luke Ryan from Smart Ops. Over to you, Luke. Luke, are you there?
Yep, perfect. Sorry, I've just been unmuted there. Good morning, everybody.
Off you go.
So, perfect. So, my name is Dr. Liam Ryan from SmartOps, and the inspiration for this technology happened when I was walking through some caves in Clare in Ireland, and the tour guide described stalactites and stalagmites as the Earth's carbon capturing technology. I got so excited that day that I drove off and left my partner stuck there for 4 hours, which was not great, but what it led to was something pretty cool. With our technology, we do exactly what the Earth does, only we do it in microseconds, not centuries. We capture all of the carbon dioxide from vehicle exhaust, chimney stacks, and the environment directly in an aqueous environment. This contains some self-sustaining and self-generating catalysts and microbes, as well as some in-house know-how and IP. And these stabilize the chemical reactions that allow us to produce salt crystals containing and capturing the carbon dioxide. These can then be dried, used in cement, or put into the ocean or watercourses and sequestered long term. This is not just for carbon though, this is a complete air pollution solution. With our modular system, we can deal with all greenhouse gases and pollutants. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and we do require power. So for 10,000 meters cubed an hour of a high level carbon capture and 30,000 meters cubed an hour of direct ambient air capture, we use roughly between 7.5 and 15 kilowatts of power, which we believe is industry leading. And we have industrial units running, as you can see from the first slide, which we'll be happy to demo. We believe industry should be industrious and pushing boundaries. We want to fit around this to ensure that we all have the opportunity to do that long term. Our technology requires minimal, or in most cases, no disruption to current production processes or vehicle exhausts, is modular and readily scalable. Basically, you do what you do best and produce goods, services, and power. We will ensure that you produce minimal or no pollution while doing that. We are 100% sure that there is now a way to make more profit while dramatically reducing carbon dioxide and other air pollutant levels. So the question is, why would we just not do that? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liam, and apologies for renaming you Luke there.
No problem, I've been called worse.
So as I said earlier, if you do want to connect with any of the people that you've seen pitch so far, then please do make your way over to the Ietf networking platform after the event, and you can connect with them there and chat in more detail about their technologies. And up next, we have Chris Wood from Future Metering. So over to you, Chris.
Me okay?
That's it, you're good.
Thank you. Apologies, I have a bit of connection problems there. So my name is Chris Wood from National Grid Metering. We offer a range of industrial gas metering applications that are typically connected by the UK gas network. We are a part of National Grid, but we are a standalone business that focuses on delivering high quality, high accurate gas metering services. If we go to the next slide, please. So we're looking to use our considerable expertise and our considerable metering capability to produce hydrogen compatible metering installations. We will then take advantage of IoT technology and machine learning to make sure that we can provide real-time energy use and energy management services to ensure real effective and granular energy usage decisions that are going to benefit consumers and upstream networks. Our offering here is really to leverage from our expertise across different industrial applications, from different pressure tiers, either from the existing UK gas networks as part of any kind of clustered competition or cluster usage, or actually closed green networks or connections to road tanker provisions, etc. We're looking for a partner who will use hydrogen to test their industrial processes, but would really value accurate and independent meter installations with enhanced energy management services that can help benefit their processes and decarbonise effectively. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Chris. And on now to G. Hansen from G Energy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is G. Jansen, active for 12 years in the power generation industry and founder of G Energy, who's basically the distributor of ORC solutions of Orcan. Our core business is to turn waste heat available into clean energy. Our customers are typically industrial site owners. This waste heat can be found, for example, in the glass, ceramic, steel, cement, and paper industry. Think about flue gases from furnaces, kilns, clinker coolers, or excess steam of boilers or CHPs. We have standardized integration concepts where we convert the heat through a heat exchanger into hot water to run our ORC packs. Depending on the heat available, this is scalable from 50 kilowatts up to 3 megawatts per heat source. So why converting your waste heat into power? Basically 3 items: save on your electricity bill, reduce CO2 emissions and carbon tax, and it's easy and quick to install. Next slide. So short introduction on Orcan. The company was founded in 2008, over 500 ORCs sold worldwide, a total of 3.2 million operating hours, so proven technology. G-Energy can provide industrial clients with waste heat to power assessments and entire turnkey solutions for their waste heat projects. Key advantages of our energy solutions are the initial CapEx is attractive, lease options available through E.ON. We provide net output power figures taking in consideration the parasitic loads. Units can work on a broad temperature range and are standardized in a 40-foot container, so easy to deploy. Excellent part load performance, and site layout can be customized according to the site needs. Low maintenance, 1 to 2 days per year. No major overhaul required after 5 years, like you would see with steam turbines. And organic working fluids that we use in our ORCs are non-flammable and non-toxic. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present at this competition briefing. And in case of any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My contact details are in the bottom right corner.
That's great. Thank you very much, G. And next up, we have Darren Bryant from Heat Catcher. Over to you, Darren.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Darren Bryant, and I would like to introduce you to Heat Catcher. We're an independent SME designing and delivering heat decarbonisation projects. And for the last 10 years, we've completed over 30 feasibility studies across most of the industrial sectors and helped many of our clients secure grant funding. We've built 4 waste heat to electricity plants, and we apply the best available technology really to recover waste heat back into the process initially. We recover low-grade temperature waste heat to increase it for heat pumps to produce hot water. And we recover higher temperature heat available from waste to generate electricity with organic Rankine cycle generators or steam screw expanders. We're a team of heat recovery engineers based at the Sussex University Innovation Centre, but our work is all over the UK. Next slide, please. Our project idea is for deep decarbonisation, to switch from producing hot water from fossil fuel boilers to electric heat pumps, recovering waste heat and ambient air into the heat pump. The technology is capable of high temperature hot water, typically above 80 degrees C. The innovation really is with the heat pump, we'll have a dual source, mixing recovered heat from a waste heat source with ambient air, and to improve its electrical efficiency. This helps to reduce the operating costs when switching away from lower cost fossil fuels. Our services start really with heat decarbonisation roadmaps. We can help with grant support applications, the feasibility studies, detailed design engineering, right through to project delivery. So we're seeking industrial partners who have sites with high demand for processed hot water and a good flow of low temperature waste heat, for example, heat rejected from a refrigeration process. So if you have these types of manufacturing facilities and are tasked with the challenges of decarbonising your heat, then please get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darren. And last but not least, we have Jeff Power from Grid Beyond.
Hello, hi Jenny, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Off you go.
Hi, good afternoon all. My name is Jeff Power. I'm the business unit manager for the delivery of net zero in Grid Beyond. Grid Beyond was founded in 2010 and is currently operational in Ireland, UK and Texas with more than 400 clients. What we do is decouple emissions from production through technology and advanced software solutions while maximising the energy market, operating across 3 overarching pillars, the first being energy and procurement, which in essence is trading and demand response. And due to what's involved in this service, the control equipment required for energy efficiency goes hand in hand in this, and we operate across this pillar also. And falling out of this pillar, we have technology solutions in which we can perform feasibility studies and implement retrofit projects. Next slide, please. For this IETF fund, the project idea proposed is focusing on process optimization to maximize efficiency. And the diagram here represents the scale of energy management services available through different digital transformation levels and ultimately moving to Industry 4.0. Looking here at the first two is around traditional energy management, where most companies operate here, and it really is the measuring and monitoring phase, which is geared towards ISO 50001 implementation. And moving on here towards advanced energy management is where Grid Beyond can offer real value. Through our software and industry knowledge, we can benchmark and fault find to increase efficiency and uptime. What's innovative about it is that it uses technology, industry knowledge and data to enable decarbonization. And in terms of our portfolio of services, looking here at the first hexagon, the portfolio, this really focuses on energy efficiency, utilizing benchmarking, fault finding, predictive maintenance, and optimized services. And what's involved in this allows us to do carbon reporting very effectively. Following on from this, we also do investment proposals, asset replacement, and asset upgrade, and we offer the full portfolio of services, including funding in relation to this here. The next diagram just gives an overview of utilizing machine learning then to predict anomalies and ultimately resulting in a live action list. And we operate across the industries listed here. We're looking to partner with those with a shared mutual benefit in the delivery of energy reduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I think the broadband was a little bit struggling there, but we got the gist of it, and everybody will get a set of the slides as well. So thank you to all of our pitchers for showcasing what technologies you have to offer. Hopefully for the industrial site owners, that's giving you some ideas of other things that you could do at your site with IETF funding. So now finally, to wrap up today's event, I'm going to present some of the support services that are available to you if you're bidding into the IETF fund. So we'll cover how to find partners, how to identify relevant technologies other than the ones we've seen today, how to find and understand the competition information. Obviously today has helped a lot to explain all the detail of it, but there's a lot more online that you can have a read through and then we can help you with, and how to actually apply into the competition. So first of all, finding partners. Well, we've mentioned it a few times today. We have our own dedicated IETF networking platform, Meeting Mojo. There's over 200 people already in there from the spring window and more hopefully added on today. When you do register and go in there, we've obviously gathered information off you as you registered, and that's created your initial profile. But please do edit it and add more detail if you want to, because that makes it a lot easier for people to be able to search for you. And you can message each other through the Meeting Mojo platform. It will be open until the end of the IETF programme, so be open until March 2025. So you can continue to network with people even when the competition windows aren't open, to prepare for the next round of funding. And as we've said a few times today, if you do want to join the community and book a 10-minute conversation with BEIS today, then please do go to that link and register, and then you'll be able to book a meeting with them directly. And just for today, the one-to-ones are video conferencing through that platform. In terms of looking for relevant technologies, so as well as everything you've seen today, we have our technology marketplace. It's a platform that we set up in the previous window, in spring window, to help the industrial site owners to know what types of technology are out there that they could deploy on their site. It has a series of 5-minute videos from technology providers, and they have described their technology and how they can see it helping industrial sites to either save energy or reduce their carbon emissions. So please, if you're an industrial site owner and you don't already have login details and you'd like access to that site, then I've provided a link on the slide there where you can register your interest. And as long as you're an eligible industrial site for the Ietf, you will have access to that platform. If you're a technology provider and you haven't already provided a 5-minute video for the technology marketplace, but you would like to, then we've also set up another registration link, which I've provided on this slide. You can see at the top of the slide, there's certain information that you would need to cover in your video so that we get the same information for the manufacturers and industrial site owners across all of the technology videos, but you can design it however you like. We would like you to make sure that the file is in MOV or MP4 format. But if you record through Zoom or Teams or on your mobile phone, it will export in that format. So you don't need any fancy equipment or anything like that. But that is a great way if you're an industrial site and you're not quite sure what to do, what can be funded through the Ietf, then I encourage you to go and have a look. Okay, so I mean, this is what it looks like. So if you haven't already been in there, it's a nice little online platform. There's lots of thumbnails for each video, and it's underneath the video thumbnails. It will tell you if it's an energy efficiency technology or a decarbonisation technology. The other thing that is new for this round of funding is we're going to have a live event where you will see humans. So please do come and join us on the 10th of November in Manchester. It's going to be a showcase of the projects that we funded in phase 1. So if you would like to come and hear from industrial site owners who have already done something, either a deployment project or a study, as you saw from our case study projects earlier, then you're welcome to come and register for that event. We'll also hear from BEIS' Net Zero Innovation Portfolio team. So they provide R&D funding. This is obviously a capital investment fund, but if you're developing the new technology, then you can hear from them at that event. And as I say, it's face-to-face. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. A registration link to the event will be circulated to you all after today's event. So please do come and join us for that. And we've made sure that all COVID measures will be put in place. If for any reason, if COVID numbers go up and we go back into lockdown, we'll convert it to an online event. So the event will still go ahead. And then help with your application process. So there is a link to the guidance. Apologies that it's not on this slide. Lily presented it earlier on, and we will make sure it's included in the email that you receive after today's event. That goes into a lot more detail about what's in scope, different technologies, all the different rules about the competition. So you can go and have a read through that. BEIS, I think as Lily and Beth said, BEIS have set up this eligibility check. So before you go to all the trouble of writing your application, which is not a 5-minute job, so we don't want to waste your time, please do contact BEIS earlier rather than later to check if your project idea is in scope, and then when you're putting all the time into writing your application that you will stand a chance of being successful. So do contact them on the Ietf email and make sure that you put in the subject line eligibility screening, just so that we can pull those ones to the top and respond straight away. And then finally, again, to help with the application process, we are again running our competition clinics. So these are fortnightly webinars. They're a bit like the Q&A session that we've had at today's event. There's no presentations, but you can come along to an open forum meeting and put your questions to BEIS and myself. It can be about anything to do with any of the 3 competitions. So do come along if having read all the guidance, something then comes up and you wish you'd asked it here today, come and sign up for one of our clinics. So there's 4 dates when they'll be taking place, and I've provided a registration link there again. You could come to one or you come to all of them. As many questions as you have, we'll welcome you along. And that is it from me. So I'm now going to hand back to Catherine Barber for our final closing remarks.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for hosting us so well through this morning. It's just been really inspiring to hear from Salsa, from Phillips 66, from all of the tech pitches about the exciting projects that could go ahead. We're really pleased that so many people have stayed with us all through the morning up to this point. There's more to come later. We'd really love to hear from you. Do get in touch with me and my colleagues from BEIS through the meeting Mojo or after this event. Our whole aim is to get as many good applications as possible and to fund as many good projects as possible. So we'd like to hear from you. We assume you've stayed to this point in the meeting because you think the Ietf might be the right fund for you. So do come and talk to us with your questions. Give us your ideas. We'd love to hear from you, and we hope to hear lots of applications, receive them soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Okay, so just needs for me to say again a huge thank you to everybody that's presented or pitched today. That's really made today's event valuable. You will be receiving an email from the KTN towards the end of this week or maybe early next week, and it will have loads of information on there for you. So you will have a link to the recording, a link to the presentations that you've seen today, registration to the live event in Manchester on the 10th of November, registration for the clinics, for the technology marketplace, for the networking platform, and also links to the competition guidance and the eligibility checker email. So lots of support there for you. Please do take advantage of all of that support. We want to wish you the best of luck with your application, and we look forward to seeing all the project ideas that come in. But for now, thank you very much. Goodbye.